Hi YouTube, this is Pep, you're watching The Sentinel. Today is my next installment for my A to Z fragrance video series, and today I'm going to talk about the letter L representing Lagerfeld Classic. Hey folks, Lagerfeld Classic was created and released in 1978, so it's been around a long time and it's nearly as old as I am. I want to start off by saying that I have some kind of emotional connection to this fragrance, and I'm a little bit biased about it because this was actually the first fragrance I ever owned as a very young man. It was given to me as a gift, so I didn't buy it, but for a long time it was the only fragrance I'd wear, and I wasn't wearing fragrances every day like I am now, so I would use this for any occasion I thought was appropriate to wear fragrances for. Back then that was the original version, so that leads me into talking about this current version which I have here. A couple of different things. The font on the bottle here is different. The original version had some like Art Deco style font. The bottle hasn't really changed, and this top still had the ring on it. I seem to remember the juice being a little bit darker perhaps, and more orangey than the tinge of pink here. So that's quite a clear juice compared to what I remember it being. Lagerfeld Classic was from the house of Karl Lagerfeld, who was a very famous German designer, fashion designer, and has his name on fragrances as well. And in fragrance circles, he's only the second most famous German next to this guy. Okay, so as I said, it came out in 1978. It's a couple of things that I need to mention. In 2012, I think it was, this Coty was the parent company that was producing Lagerfeld Classic. That then became Inter Parfums, and so this has gone through a couple of reformulations. This is the Inter Parfum reformulation. I'm not sure if it's what it currently is, but off the top of my head, before I get into detail about the notes and development, this is definitely still within the spirit of the fragrance that I remember, and I haven't smelt the vintage in years. So, but when I did first spray this one on my skin, it immediately brought me back. So there's something obviously still very familiar about this. So I'll get into the details now. So there are a lot of notes in this fragrance, and I'll scroll those across the screen now. But what I generally get in the opening is some kind of citrusy. I know there are aldehydes in here, and I believe there's one type of aldehyde that does produce an orange-like smell, and that's mixing with in the opening that I get. It's mixing with lemon and some herbs there. There's clary sage and tarragon in the opening, so that's the kind of opening I get. It's a very initially very sharp and herbally opening with some citrus, but it dies down very quickly, and from memory I think that's what the vintage opened up with as well. Now as we move into the mids, which develop after a few minutes, so the citrus definitely dies down, and what I pick up myself is a nice combination of patchouli, some cedar and tobacco. So the thing to note here is that the tobacco, once it comes in shortly after the opening, it stays throughout the fragrance. To me, the tobacco is a very light, sweet-ish style tobacco, and it basically for me forms the backbone of this current fragrance. Now there are also there is some jasmine and rose in this, and I think that basically sits very much in the background, and they develop a little bit later on in the dry down, and they incorporate with some of the base notes to form quite a lovely ambery, powdery dry down. So in the base, as I mentioned, it's for me predominantly amber, a little bit of powder, still the tobacco's there. Some of the florals sit in the background and give it and lend to it a little bit of sweetness, and then I get like a musky kind of mossy combination as well. What this ultimately becomes to me is a very warm, comforting, powdery, masculine fragrance. But when I say masculine, I mean it's not a very refined light powder. It's quite a rough powder is the best way I can describe it, but it is still very comforting, and it's lovely cozy smell once it's dried down, and it's quite a contrast to the particularly sharp opening that only lasts you know, a minute or so. There is vanilla and tonka listed in the base here, but I don't pick up a lot of it. I've read a few reviews where the vanilla is picked up by a lot of reviewers, and I'm not sure if they're reviewing a vintage version, and I am told by people who still have vintage bottles that the smell, although pretty much the same, there is definitely more richness and depth to the vintage, and I believe it. I'm pretty sure this has kind of been weakened slightly, and I'll talk about its performance now. So on my skin, I'm getting about 6 hours of longevity. That initially comes with projection, probably arm's length, and then relatively soon it sits close to the skin for up to 6 hours. Now, normally 6 hours is borderline for what I would find okay, but at this price, this is particularly cheap to get online, and I think that's acceptable. So when would I use this? Definitely for me, this is a cooler weather, early spring fragrance, and I think predominantly I would prefer to use this more in a casual setting, but it can be dressed up if you want to smell a little bit different, a bit more mature, a bit more old school. Definitely it can be worn with more formal attire, but still very versatile. The one thing I will say about this is that this is, like I said, this is still readily available, even in its reformulated version, which is you know, probably a weaker imitation of the original. This will still have you smelling more unique and different to, you know, 80% of the stuff that's getting released by designers out there as well. It's classified as an oriental woody. I will keep this in my wardrobe because I'm attached to it. As long as the essence of that smell is there, I'll love it, and I enjoy wearing it. I don't smell it on many other people these days, but you know, I'm an older guy now, and I'm not sure how many younger guys would be in for this, but I would still encourage them to try it. So guys or women, I think certainly if you're a woman, don't be afraid to give this a try, and hopefully you'll like it. Alright, so that's enough from me. That was Lagerfeld Classic, and I will see you next time. Thank you.